Fire. It's one of the most important and enigmatic elements in our expressions of magical ritual spirituality. For me in the green art tradition, fire is crucial to all of the workings that we do, not only to tending grove and tending shrine, but also to our acts of medicine making and magic making and ritual, and of course honoring the fates, honoring the festivals that mark the seasonal shifts throughout the year. So let's talk a little bit about fire and why it is such an important inclusion in our work. First, traditionally, the fire kindled in a hearth was required in order for somebody to take ownership of space, right? So a house, a property, squatters' rights in some cases, was not official until the fire was lit and smoke was coming out of the chimney. That meant that somebody had settled in, right? They had sort of taken protection or taken responsibility for the property. And I believe that this tradition goes far, far back into the importance of hunter-gatherers and also nomadic folk being able to kindle a fire as a way to enter into direct relationship with the land that they were on. And so that ability to mark out a space, gather wood, and successfully kindle a fire was in and of itself a ritual of sovereignty. And to a certain degree, that kind of hides a more magical ritual aspect of the process of kindling fire. So that's what I want to focus on in this class. Now, there are two ways to kindle a fire. First, we can use matches, a lighter, all of that, and that's totally fine. That's what I do. The other is to kindle a fire, what we will call a need fire, and this is kindled by hand. So using a bow and a stick, or flint and steel, or two rocks, or a magnifying glass with the sun's rays, however you do it, you're kindling the fire in a way that doesn't necessarily involve one of our modern conveniences. And these fires, by nature of how much has to go into them in order for us to invoke the spirit of the fire, are basically from the get-go considered sacred. The need fire is crucial when kindling bonfires for the fates. The, of course, celebrated Beltane balefires needed to be kindled by hand in order for them to be sanctified, in order for them to be considered sacred. We also see this reflected in ancient Proto-Indo-European traditions, in the Vedic cultures of the yajna, the homa, the sacrificial fire having to be kindled in a certain way in order for that fire to be properly honored and thus properly invoked. Agni, the god of fire. So this is something that I think we can carry into our contemporary practices, and I find a lot of power in it. It's very simple, and it really does change sort of the feel of things. It really does take things into a different direction, into a different power when the fire is kindled with intent. So let me share with you the main purpose why I think fire is important in our work, and that is that the light of the fire, whether it is a bonfire, a campfire, a hearth fire, or in our ritual cases, usually a candle or two, the light that emanates from this represents the sacred space we are enveloped in when we do our work. And so there's that aspect that light is cast, warmth is cast, vitality is cast to sort of fill up the space where we're doing our ritual working. And that's great in and of itself. But it goes deeper. The fire also represents our area of influence, the area where we have the greatest deal of power, the greatest amount of effect over space. And so it's a reminder that although we've sort of been conditioned to think in these terms of think locally, act globally, that's been found to not be very ecologically sound or very effective. So when we think about taking personal responsibility for the space that we occupy, for our neighborhoods, our community organizations, our various expressions of community, our groups for hobby, our groups for spirituality. Those are the people whose minds we can change the greatest when something is not quite right, when there is an issue of injustice or inequality. It's hard for us to change the world. It's easier for us to change the minds and the hearts of people who we're already in close, intimate relationship with, right? That global transformation really starts at home. It really starts within our communities. And that if everybody sort of stepped up and paid attention and put their energy into the places where their campfire reach, not literally, but sort of figuratively of the places where we sort of haunt every single day, taking care of the injustices, the land, the environment, unhoused neighbors, picking up trash, protecting land, protecting water within our reach, and everybody was doing that, everywhere would be good. And it is contagious, because what ends up happening is people see one area being really well cared for and really well stewarded, and that sort of inspiration tends to be contagious and trickle from one place to another. So we have the protective energy of the light of fire. We have the influential energy of the light of fire, which really represents our heart fire expanding out into the places where we have the most influence and making positive change for the good of all, creating true equity in the world. And finally, but certainly last but not least, we come back to this idea of the fire of sovereignty, of kindling a fire to take responsibility for space. And this is really the big part, especially when we are doing a formal ritual, and especially when we're practicing outdoors, when we're in a wild space, a forest, or even our own backyard, that by the ritual kindling of a fire or a candle, we're sort of making a contract or a pact with the spirits of place, saying, for the duration that this fire burns, I take responsibility for what happens in this space. I'm stepping in as sovereign. I'm stepping in as protector, as steward, and as guardian. And my goal through the kindling of this fire and its extinguishing is that everything that happens here will add to the harmony of this space, and that I will in some way leave this place better than I found it, even if that's just in the sense that the place has been honored and blessed with your ritual workings, the spirits have been fed and acknowledged, or more practically that trash has been picked up and rocks have been put back to where they were if somebody moved them, and that type of thing. So the kindling of the fire in the green art tradition is an act of contract. It is contractual, and it is not something to screw with. The way that we kindle the fire, the intention of our heart, and maybe the words that we say very much clarify the fact that with the kindling of this fire, I take personal responsibility for this space. I will treat this space as though it is my own body. It is the body of my beloveds, my kin, right? Because it is. And so this act in and of itself sort of nudges us into this space of radical responsibility and very, very good ethics, not morality, but ethics. It really invites us to consider every single thing we do. What are we going to bring into the space? If we leave anything in the space, what are we leaving? Is it eco-affirming? Is it detrimental to the space? Should we be moving rocks around and moving logs and disturbing spaces where the wild animals and the spirits of place might call home? It's a reminder and a meditation that we will be in this space, we will occupy this place for an hour, but there are beings, both seen and unseen, known and unknown, named and unnamed, formed and without form, who live here all the time. This is their always home. We're a guest. So the kindling of the fire with intention, the lighting of the candle, the lighting of the bonfire, and the claim that for the duration of this ritual, for the duration this fire burns, I take personal responsibility for this space really is more about getting our behaviors in check than it is about, anything else. Um, so I encourage it because it gets us into the right frame of mind. It gets us into the right frame of heart. It helps make sure that everything's good. And then when that fire is extinguished, when the candle is put out, whatever, uh, with the intention of our heart, and again, maybe our words and maybe some other ritual signal, we return the land to the beings, to the spirits of place who have so graciously shared it with us. We ask forgiveness of any trespasses or any wrongs done, and we hope that we have left this space blessed and empowered by our presence. And if something's wrong, in that moment, generally we will feel it. We'll feel a heaviness. We'll feel a sense of things not being quite right, not being completed. That feeling you get when you're, 20 minutes away from home and suddenly you're like, did I lock the door? Did I turn the stove off? There's this feeling of things being undone, unaccomplished, and we'll have that feeling. And it's an opportunity to just stop for a minute, leave the fire on, and kind of go back over, survey the situation and say, what could be done better? And sometimes we have to enter into communication with the spirits of place or with the land itself to figure that out. So what all of this discussion about fire boils down to is the ritual expression, the ritual kindling of a fire to take sovereignty, to take responsibility for a space, for a time, and to honor the contract, to show up and to show the spirits that you're one of the folk who will do the work. You're one of the ones that will honor the unspoken contract, will show up in the way that we are contracted to show up, and that you can be trusted, which is nice. And I say this all the time, and it's not a joke. Plant spirits tell their friends, the spirits of place tell their friends that when you show up properly in one space, you will be received with greater affection in the next space, and you'll feel it. It will get deeper and deeper and deeper and more aligned and more harmonious, and suddenly the wild animals and insects of place will stay. The trees will be more responsive to your work. It will be easier for you to find locations with privacy and power. Everything just kind of lines up. You find that green thread and you follow it and you follow it, and it leads you into these deeper and deeper beautiful places. So just some musings on fire. Now, for those of us who keep shrine, who keep a sacred space inside of our homes, an altar, a shrine, a working table, whatever you want to call it, this practice can absolutely be brought in as well, but in a slightly different way. The home is where we kindle the hearth fire, right? Which the hearth fire is, even if it's not literal, like I don't have a fireplace in my home, but my pilot light always burns, and there's always something happening in the house, right? So even though our version of hearth fire is not literal these days, it's figurative, and the idea is that the fire of our presence is what keeps us responsible for space. So you are responsible always for the space that you inhabit, beyond just your own creature comforts, beyond just your own well-being, making sure that the spirits of place, the spirits who share their place with you, who have been there longer than you, are well acknowledged and well honored. That when we move into a new place or we establish a shrine or a spiritual working, that we're taking a greater degree of responsibility for that place, and that we have to show up for the contract. We have to do what's right. Within specific rituals indoors, you can absolutely kind of take a greater sense of responsibility from the lighting of the fire to its extinguishing, but be aware when you occupy a space, you're responsible for it. And you're responsible to the best of your ability, honor the ancient contracts between the beings, between the persons, human and non-human, and to try to be in conscious relationship with the land so that you are learning and, ideally always behaving in the best possible way. And that is a nudge towards a very simple ritual that we can do when we move into a new home, move into a new space, move into a new business location, of doing a ritual cleansing and then a ritual kindling of a fire to sort of announce our presence and to make it known that we are going to do our very best to be good stewards of place, and that we're going to try to remain open to the communications of the people who live there, seen and unseen, to be in right relationship with them, to honor them duly, and to celebrate a kinship of peace and plenty. And so that is just a very intuitive type of ritual that we can do when moving into a new space and occupying a new space. So some musings on fire. Hopefully that will inspire you to kindle a good fire in your practices. And if you work with fire, or have practices that revolve around, lighting a candle or kindling a fire, or working with it in a certain way, I would love to hear what you're doing and how it relates. So share it in the comments below or reach out to me. And until next time, light and warmth in every direction.